I always knew I wanted to be my own boss. From the time I was a kid, I had a strange obsession with entrepreneurship. My parents were never entrepreneurs. They worked regular 9 to 5 jobs, but there was something about the idea of being in control of my own destiny that always fascinated me. My path wasn't traditional, and honestly, there were a lot of bumps along the way. But looking back now, I realize that every step, every misstep, led me to where I am today. It all started in college. I wasn't the smartest or most talented, but I had this drive to succeed. I studied business, mainly because it seemed like the most logical path to becoming an entrepreneur. But, like many young people, I had no idea what that actually meant. All I knew was that I wanted to build something from scratch. During my sophomore year, I came up with an idea for a product, a mobile app that could connect local businesses with potential customers through a reward system. It seemed perfect. Small businesses needed to find ways to reach more people, and consumers loved rewards. I didn't know the first thing about coding, but I was determined. I borrowed money from my parents and used it to hire a freelance developer. I pitched the idea to everyone I knew. Some were supportive, others skeptical, but that didn't stop me. I was fired up. Fast forward a few months, and we had a working prototype. I remember feeling on top of the world. My first business. But reality hit hard. The app didn't get the traction I expected. Users weren't signing up like I thought they would. Local businesses weren't enthusiastic about paying for a service they didn't fully understand. It was a classic case of build it, and they will come, but they didn't come. I was crushed. I had invested all my savings into this project, and I was watching it slowly die. But here's the thing, quitting was never an option. I didn't want to go back to working a desk job. So, I took a step back and reassessed the situation. I asked myself, what did I do wrong? After a lot of trial and error, I realized that I was trying to make something that the market didn't want. I hadn't done enough research. I hadn't talked to the people who would actually use the app. I hadn't listened to the feedback from the businesses I was trying to serve. Instead of throwing in the towel, I pivoted. I started focusing on a smaller niche. Instead of trying to create an app that served all types of businesses, I narrowed my focus to local coffee shops. I started visiting these coffee shops, talking to owners, understanding their pain points. I learned that they were struggling with customer retention and that their loyalty programs were outdated. Armed with this insight, I rebuilt the app to better suit their needs. This time, things were different. The coffee shop owners loved the new version of the app. They could track customer visits, offer rewards, and send personalized promotions directly to their customers' phones. Slowly but surely, more coffee shops started signing up. I had learned an invaluable lesson. Success wasn't about having a brilliant idea. It was about listening, adjusting, and evolving. Over the next year, the app gained traction, and I was able to hire a small team. We expanded beyond coffee shops, slowly moving into other types of small businesses. It wasn't easy. There were late nights, tough decisions, and a lot of moments where I thought about giving up. But as the business grew, so did my confidence. I started feeling like I was finally on the right path. But even with all the success, things weren't always smooth sailing. One of my biggest challenges came in the form of a competitor. Another app company entered the market with a similar product, but they had far more resources and a bigger team. They started poaching some of my clients, offering them better deals, and undercutting my pricing. It was a major blow. I could feel the pressure building. Instead of getting discouraged, I chose to fight back. I doubled down on customer service. I made sure that every client felt like they were our top priority. We started offering personalized features that the competitor didn't have. We held customer appreciation events and sent out handwritten thank you notes. It was hard to compete on price, but we could compete on relationships. That focus on customer loyalty helped us maintain our client base. The competition did push me to improve. I started looking at our business model more critically. What could we do better? How could we scale more efficiently? That's when I decided to pivot again, this time moving our entire platform to the cloud. It was a risky decision, but it paid off. By offering more flexibility and scalability, we were able to attract bigger clients who were willing to pay a premium for our services. It wasn't just about fighting the competition, though. I also focused on building a strong company culture. We were a small team, but we were like a family. I made sure to hire people who were passionate about the work we were doing, not just people who had the right qualifications. I wanted people who believed in the mission of helping small businesses thrive. In 2023, things really took off. The app became a staple for many small businesses across the country, and we were finally turning a profit. I remember standing in our office one night, looking around at my team, and realizing how far we'd come. I wasn't just an entrepreneur anymore. I was a leader. I had built something that was having a real impact on people's lives. But even with all of that success, I knew that it wasn't the end. There were always new challenges on the horizon. I couldn't rest on my laurels. The business world is always evolving, and I had to keep adapting if I wanted to stay relevant. Now, several years into running this business, I feel a sense of pride, but I also know that the road isn't always going to be smooth. Entrepreneurship isn't a one-time victory. It's a constant cycle of reinvention, adaptation, and growth. The key to success isn't avoiding failure, it's learning from it and using those lessons to keep moving forward. And to anyone out there thinking of starting their own business, don't be afraid to fail. Failures are just lessons in disguise. The only real failure is not trying at all. You've got to be willing to take risks, put in the work, and adapt when things don't go as planned. The road to success isn't easy, but if you stick with it long enough, you just might find that it was worth every single step. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. It helps the content grow and motivates me to create even more great videos. Turn on notifications so you don't miss any new uploads. By the way, I'm curious, when do you usually watch my videos? While working, studying, or just relaxing at home? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. Thank you for your support. I always thought I had everything figured out. I grew up in a middle-class family, went to a good college, got a decent job at a tech company, and had the typical 9-to-5 routine. But there was one problem: I hated it. Every morning, I'd wake up feeling drained just thinking about the workday ahead. I wasn't passionate about the product we were building or the corporate culture that surrounded me. One day, after another miserable meeting where my boss belittled my suggestions for the 100th time, I decided that I had to get out. But I had no idea what I wanted to do next. I didn't want to go back to school, and I definitely didn't want to work for someone else anymore. I needed a way to break free, and that's when it hit me. I had a problem with my diet that I'd been ignoring for years, and I wasn't the only one. See, I've always struggled with my weight. I would constantly try fad diets, meal plans, and exercise routines, but nothing ever worked long-term. The worst part was, I wasn't alone in this. I had friends, family, and coworkers who were dealing with the same frustration, too busy to cook healthy meals, constantly on the go, and stuck in a cycle of unhealthy eating. I thought, there has to be a better way. That's when the idea came to me. What if I could create a food delivery service that made healthy, easy-to-eat meals for busy people like me? Meals that were nutritious, delicious, and didn't require anyone to be a chef. It seemed simple, but I couldn't stop thinking about it. Every night after work, I'd start brainstorming. I didn't know the first thing about the food industry, but I figured I could learn. I spent the next few months obsessively researching the meal delivery business. I read articles, watched YouTube videos, and talked to anyone I could find who had experience in the space. At the same time, I started experimenting with recipes in my kitchen. I went on Pinterest, trying out healthy meal ideas, testing different ingredients, and refining the flavors. Some were terrible, others just okay, but I was determined to get it right. One day, while waiting for a friend at a cafe, I overheard two people talking about their struggles with meal prep and healthy eating. They were complaining about how hard it was to find affordable, nutritious food options. That was my eureka moment. I could be the one to solve that problem. The next few weeks were a blur of late-night planning and phone calls. I had no money to invest in this venture, so I had to start small. I borrowed $2000 from my savings and used it to create a basic website and order a small batch of ingredients to test my first meals. I also hired a part-time chef to help me get the recipes just right, since I knew I didn't have the culinary expertise. The goal was simple: get a few people to try it and see if they liked the meals. I started small, offering a subscription service where customers could get healthy meals delivered to their door every week. I called it FitBite. It was a humble beginning, just a few meals each week, cooked in a shared commercial kitchen space that I rented by the hour. I promoted the service on social media and reached out to fitness influencers in my area, offering them free meals in exchange for a review. The first few weeks were slow. I only had a handful of customers, and most of them were friends or friends of friends. I remember the first time I had a paying customer who wasn't a friend. It felt like a huge win. But as the weeks went by, the momentum started to build. Word of mouth spread, and people started sharing their FitBite meals on Instagram. I even had a couple of local gyms reach out and ask if I could offer special discounts for their members. That was when I realized that this wasn't just a side hustle. It had the potential to be something bigger. But with that growth came challenges. My kitchen space was tiny, and I quickly outgrew it. I was working 18-hour days trying to fulfill orders, handle customer service, and figure out the logistics. I had to hire more help, but that meant paying more employees and increasing overhead. Cash flow was tight, and I was constantly stressing over how to balance expenses with revenue. There were nights I went to bed not knowing how I was going to cover payroll the next week. Despite the struggles, I kept pushing forward. I knew that if I could just make it through the rough patches, FitBite could be something big. So, I took out a small loan to invest in a commercial kitchen and a better delivery system. It was a huge risk, but it was the only way to scale up. And it worked. As FitBite grew, I learned the importance of creating a strong brand identity. I hired a marketing team to help me build a more polished online presence, and we began focusing on creating content that resonated with people who cared about health and fitness. Our meal options became more varied, with choices for people on different diets like keto, vegan, and paleo. We also started offering personalized nutrition plans, which gave our customers more options and flexibility. But the real breakthrough came when we expanded our delivery service to other cities. At first, it was just a couple of locations, but within a year, we were shipping FitBite meals to over 50 cities across the country. We even started partnering with large corporations to provide healthy meal plans for their employees, which opened up a whole new revenue stream. By the time I was 30, FitBite had grown into a multi-million-dollar business. We had a full team working across various departments: marketing, operations, customer service, and our /&D. We were featured in several major publications, and I had investors approaching me, wanting to be a part of the business. I had to pinch myself. Looking back, it still feels surreal. I never expected to go from being stuck in a soul-crushing job to building a business that helped people improve their lives. But the one thing that kept me going through all the difficult moments was my belief that I was solving a real problem. People needed better food options, and I was determined to be the one to provide them. Now, at 33, I'm running a company that I'm truly proud of. We've helped thousands of people make healthier choices, and the feedback I get from customers keeps me motivated every day. I'm still learning, still growing, and still passionate about the mission we set out to accomplish. The journey wasn't easy. There were countless nights of doubt, countless times when I thought I should just quit and go back to a normal job. But I never gave up. And now, FitBite is more than just a business, it's a lifestyle. I've realized that if you truly believe in something and are willing to put in the work, even when things get tough, the rewards will follow. And sometimes, the best ideas come from just paying attention to the problems around you. I never thought I'd be where I am today. I didn't come from money, didn't have any connections, and honestly, I was the type of person who thought success stories were for the lucky ones or the geniuses. But here I am now, running a successful tech startup and reflecting on the winding road that led me here. This is my story, one that started with a failing business and a lot of frustration, but ultimately turned into something I never imagined possible. It all started about 5 years ago. I was fresh out of college, armed with a degree in business and no real idea of what I was doing. I had been working a boring desk job in a marketing agency. It was a safe gig, steady paycheck, but I felt like I was suffocating. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was meant to do more. The entrepreneurial itch had started early, and it didn't help that I was constantly reading about people who had made it big by starting their own companies. I was obsessed with success stories, watching interviews, reading books, and listening to podcasts. That was when I made the decision that would change everything. I quit my job. At the time, I had no clear plan. I was going to launch a startup, but I didn't know what it would be. I just knew that I was ready to put everything on the line to chase the dream of being my own boss. I'd saved up enough money to survive for a few months, and I figured I'd figure it out as I went along. The first thing I did was talk to friends and family about my idea. And that's when the reality hit me. Everyone thought I was crazy. My parents were supportive but worried. My friends thought I was just chasing a pipe dream. But I was stubborn, I had my mind set, and I dove right into research. I spent the next few weeks trying to figure out what industry I wanted to dive into. It was overwhelming. The tech space seemed like the obvious choice, so I started focusing on that. I read everything I could about app development, startup culture, and the tech giants that had paved the way. Eventually, I stumbled across a problem that I felt no one had fully addressed. It was a simple, everyday frustration that millions of people faced, and I knew if I could find a way to solve it, I might have a shot at making something big. The problem? Scheduling. Everyone's lives are busier than ever, and people are constantly juggling appointments, meetings, and events. I thought there had to be a better way to help people manage their time. So, I came up with an idea for an app that would integrate all your schedules, work, personal, social, into one easy-to-use platform. It wasn't just about calendar syncing, it was about anticipating needs. I wanted an app that would automatically suggest optimal times for meetings based on your schedule, alert you about potential conflicts before they happened, and even suggest the best time to take breaks. It sounded great in theory, but developing it was another story. I was completely out of my depth. I couldn't code, and I had no idea how to build an app from the ground up. But that didn't stop me. I started learning how to code. I spent every free hour I had watching tutorials, reading books, and building small projects. It was a steep learning curve, and there were many nights I thought about throwing in the towel. But something kept me going. I didn't want to be the person who gave up too soon. I had something to prove, not just to others, but to myself. Eventually, after months of hard work, I built a prototype. It wasn't perfect by any means, but it was functional enough to show a few friends and potential users. The feedback was encouraging, and that gave me the confidence to take the next step. But I knew I couldn't do it alone forever. I needed to bring in a team to take it to the next level. I hired my first employee, a developer who was much more experienced than I was. He became a key part of the project, and together, we managed to refine the app's features and fix its glitches. We were still a tiny operation, but there was something magical about the process of turning an idea into reality. We had something tangible to show for our work. But then, the harsh reality of entrepreneurship hit. We needed money. I had enough saved up to keep the lights on for a while, but I knew it wouldn't last forever. I began reaching out to investors, pitching our idea to anyone who would listen. And for every person who seemed interested, there were 10 who turned us down. I started to doubt myself. Maybe this wasn't meant to be. But I kept going. I couldn't quit now, not after all the work I'd put in. I refined my pitch, adjusted our business model, and kept hustling. After months of rejection, we finally got a yes. A small but well-connected investor believed in our vision. With that seed money, we were able to expand our team, launch a beta version of the app, and start marketing it to a wider audience. The launch was underwhelming. We got some downloads, but not nearly as many as we had hoped for. We weren't seeing the user growth that we needed to stay afloat. It was discouraging. The pressure was mounting, and I felt like I was failing everyone who had believed in me. But then something unexpected happened. We got a call from a major tech company that had been watching our progress. They were interested in acquiring the app. At first, I thought it was a joke. Why would anyone want to buy our small startup with barely any traction? But it turned out to be the opportunity of a lifetime. The deal wasn't huge, but it was enough to give me the capital to rebuild and scale the business in a way I never could have done on my own. With their resources, we were able to improve the product, reach more users, and eventually start generating real revenue. Fast forward to today, and the app has millions of users worldwide. We're still growing, still refining, still hustling. It hasn't been easy, and there are still days when I wonder if I'm doing the right thing. But when I look at where I started, burned out in a corporate job, unsure of my future, it's hard not to feel proud of what I've built. I didn't have a big advantage when I started. No family wealth, no magic formula for success, just a lot of grit and determination. And most importantly, I learned that success isn't about getting everything perfect right out of the gate. It's about persevering through the tough times, learning from every mistake, and being willing to adapt and grow. It's about never giving up, no matter how many times you fail. I'm not some tech genius. I'm just a guy who decided to keep going when it seemed easier to quit. And if I can do it, anyone can. It was the summer of 2014 when I decided to quit my corporate job to pursue a dream. I had spent the last 5 years climbing the corporate ladder at a well-established tech company, doing the usual 9 to 5 grind. I had everything I could ask for: a steady income, great colleagues, and a nice office overlooking the city. But something was missing. My heart wasn't in it, and I realized I was just going through the motions. I wanted more. The turning point came one Friday evening after a particularly grueling week. I was sitting in my cubicle, scrolling through my phone, when an ad popped up for an online course on entrepreneurship. It was one of those turn your passion into a profitable business ads, the kind that always felt a little too good to be true. But for some reason, that night, it caught my attention. I clicked on the link. The course promised to teach you everything from identifying a niche to scaling a business. As I read through the testimonials, I started to think about what I could do. What if I could take the leap and start something on my own? Could I actually succeed? I didn't have all the answers. I didn't even know where to start, but I couldn't shake the idea. That night, I went home and talked to my wife. She was supportive, as she always had been, but I could see the concern in her eyes. I had a good job, a steady income, and we were comfortable. She asked me to think carefully, and I promised her I would. Over the next few weeks, I spent my evenings researching business ideas. I tried to listen to podcasts, read books, and join forums to learn about what it really meant to be an entrepreneur. Everything I read sounded so exciting, yet overwhelming at the same time. I would get inspired one minute and paralyzed by fear the next. How would I even begin? What if I failed? But then, one day, while browsing through a tech forum, I saw a post about building a SaaS, software as a service, product. The post explained how the author had launched a small software business that solved a common problem, and it had grown into a six-figure company within a year. My heart skipped a beat. I had experience in tech, and I could understand the language. It was a perfect match. I decided to take the plunge. The first hurdle was deciding what problem I could solve. I spent weeks brainstorming and talking to people in different industries. Eventually, I realized that the one thing every entrepreneur struggles with, no matter the field, was managing their time effectively. Everyone I spoke to complained about being overwhelmed by emails, meetings, and tasks. That's when I came up with the idea for a productivity tool. It would integrate tasks, schedules, and emails into one seamless platform, allowing users to prioritize their day with ease. I put together a rough prototype. It wasn't pretty, but it worked. I then spent hours tweaking the design, coding the backend, and figuring out the best way to present the app to potential customers. It was a steep learning curve, but the excitement kept me going. After months of working on the product in my free time, I felt ready to launch. I built a simple landing page, created a demo video, and began cold emailing anyone I thought might be interested. I also reached out to a few influencers in the productivity space, hoping for some buzz. I got a few replies, but most were dismissive. Still, I wasn't deterred. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, I launched the beta version of the product. To my surprise, people started signing up. The first few days were slow, but every time I saw a new user, it felt like a huge win. I got feedback from the early users and quickly made adjustments to the product. It wasn't perfect, but I was starting to see the potential. I continued to work on it every evening, doing everything I could to make the app better. I listened to feedback, fixed bugs, and added features that my users asked for. It wasn't until 6 months later, when I reached out to a few larger productivity bloggers, that things really started to pick up. One blogger decided to feature the app on his site. Within hours, I saw a massive spike in traffic. That was when I realized I had something worth pursuing. The feedback kept pouring in, and I started to get more paying customers. I used that initial revenue to invest in improving the app and marketing it more aggressively. I also hired a freelancer to help with customer support and development. Slowly but surely, I started to build a small team. The next year was a blur. We added new features, improved the user interface, and focused on customer success. The customer base grew steadily, and within 18 months, my product was making enough money to replace my corporate salary. It was time to quit my job. Leaving the corporate world wasn't easy. There was a lot of fear and uncertainty, but I had already proven to myself that this business could work. I didn't have a solid plan for how things would play out, but I had my vision, a great product, and a growing customer base. That was enough. I remember the first few months of running the business full-time. There were days when I felt like I was in over my head. There were issues I hadn't anticipated, like the increasing number of support tickets, software bugs, and marketing challenges. But with each challenge came a solution, and slowly, the business began to run more smoothly. Over the next few years, the company grew. I expanded the team, moved into an office, and even raised a small round of funding. But the real breakthrough came when I decided to scale aggressively. I realized that to truly make an impact, we needed to grow quickly and capture more market share. We tripled our marketing budget, hired more engineers, and worked on partnerships with other productivity tools. By the time I looked back, my small startup had grown into a full-fledged business. In 2021, we hit a milestone I hadn't even dared to dream of. We crossed the 7-figure revenue mark. It was surreal to think about. A few years prior, I had been sitting at my desk in a cubicle, wondering if I could ever make this dream a reality. Now, as I sit in my office, surrounded by a team of talented people who share the same vision, I know the hard work and sacrifice were worth it. There were plenty of tough moments, but those were the moments that taught me the most. Entrepreneurship isn't just about the big wins, it's about the lessons you learn along the way. So, to anyone out there who's thinking about making the leap, I won't lie, it's hard. There are days when you'll doubt yourself, when it feels like everything is falling apart. But if you keep pushing forward, learning, and adapting, you can build something incredible. It's not easy, but it's worth it. And now, after everything we've been through, I know that the best decision I ever made was to take that first step and risk everything for something I believed in. If I can do it, so can you. I grew up in a small town where the idea of entrepreneurship was pretty much a foreign concept. The kids around me talked about becoming doctors, lawyers, and teachers, but the notion of owning a business wasn't even on the radar. My family wasn't wealthy, nor were we living in poverty, but we were far from what anyone would consider successful. My parents worked hard. My dad was a mechanic, and my mom worked 2 jobs as a waitress. We didn't have much, but I never went without the essentials. Even though my parents didn't have the business savvy to teach me about building wealth, they instilled in me a sense of discipline and the value of hard work. I never knew what I wanted to do with my life, but I always had an entrepreneurial itch. I would spend hours reading about famous business figures, from Steve Jobs to Mark Cuban, hoping to figure out what made them successful. I didn't have a clear plan, but I knew I wanted to work for myself and not be stuck in a 9-to-5 grind. It wasn't until I was 22 that I got my first taste of the entrepreneurial world. I was working at a small retail job, just trying to get by while figuring out what my next move was. One day, I was scrolling through social media and saw an ad for a dropshipping course. I had no idea what dropshipping was, but the ad promised financial freedom with minimal effort. It sounded too good to be true, but something about it caught my attention. I clicked the link, signed up for the course, and spent the next few weeks obsessively learning about how the business model worked. The concept was simple. Find products from suppliers who would ship directly to customers, cut out the middleman, and keep the profit. It seemed like a perfect way to start a business with little upfront investment, and I could operate it from the comfort of my own home. I immediately set up a website, picked a niche, trendy tech gadgets, and started advertising on Facebook. My first campaign was a disaster. I had no idea how to properly target ads. My website was clunky, and the product selection was all wrong. I ended up losing money on the first few sales I made. But I didn't give up. Instead, I took a step back, reevaluated my approach, and began investing in learning. I watched YouTube tutorials, read blogs, and joined online communities. I figured out how to optimize my ads, choose better products, and improve my website's design. Slowly but surely, sales started rolling in. It wasn't fast or easy, but I could see the potential. I remember the first time I made a sale while I was sleeping. I woke up to a notification on my phone and saw that I had earned $45 while I was asleep. It was a small win, but to me, it felt like I had unlocked the secret to financial independence. After about 6 months of grinding, I started making consistent sales. I was still working my retail job, but I was spending all my free time on my dropshipping business. Eventually, I was making enough money from my online store that I was able to quit my retail job. I was ecstatic. It wasn't much at first, but the idea of being my own boss was enough to make me feel like I had finally accomplished something. At this point, I realized that dropshipping, while profitable, was never going to make me truly rich. The margins were slim, and I was still relying on suppliers and external platforms like Facebook for advertising. I needed something more sustainable, something I could fully control. After a lot of thought, I decided to pivot and launch my own brand. The decision wasn't easy. It meant investing my savings into creating a product and building a brand from the ground up. I knew it would be risky, but I was willing to bet on myself. I spent the next year developing a product, a set of high-quality, eco-friendly phone cases made from recycled materials. The process was tedious, from sourcing materials to finding a manufacturer I trusted. I also had to learn about branding, packaging, and building a loyal customer base. It wasn't like drop shipping, where everything was handled by someone else. Now, I was in charge of everything. The first few months of my new business were tough. I had to deal with inventory issues, slow customer growth, and even a failed marketing campaign. I remember one month, I only made a handful of sales, and I thought about giving up. But I kept pushing. I started reaching out to influencers, offering free products in exchange for reviews, and slowly but surely, I began building a loyal following. I worked harder than I ever had before, and gradually, my brand began to gain momentum. It wasn't an overnight success. In fact, it took me nearly 3 years to get to the point where my brand was profitable enough to support me full-time. But the hard work paid off. My phone cases became popular, and I expanded into other eco-friendly tech accessories. I was able to hire a small team to help me with operations, and I even started offering my products on platforms like Amazon and Etsy. My brand was finally growing, and I felt a sense of pride knowing that it was entirely my creation. The thing that surprised me the most was how much I enjoyed the process. There were days when I felt like throwing in the towel, but the victories, both big and small, made it all worth it. I had learned so much about business, marketing, and resilience. What I thought was just a side hustle had turned into a full-fledged brand, and I had become the entrepreneur I had always dreamed of being. Looking back, I realized that the key to my success was persistence. There were countless times when I wanted to quit. The road to success was filled with failure, but each failure taught me something valuable. Every setback was a lesson in disguise. Most importantly, I learned to believe in myself when no one else did. Starting a business isn't easy. It's a roller coaster ride filled with highs and lows. But if you stick with it long enough, the results can be life-changing. I'm not a billionaire, but I'm financially independent, and I've built something I'm proud of. I don't take my success for granted, and I know it's the result of years of hard work and perseverance. Looking back, I'm grateful for every lesson, every failure, and every small win. Entrepreneurship has taught me more about myself than any job ever could, and I'm excited to see where the journey takes me next. When I first left college, I had no idea what I wanted to do with my life. My degree was in business administration, but I wasn't passionate about anything specific. Like many others, I just assumed that I would figure things out along the way. I ended up getting a job as a marketing coordinator for a small startup, where I quickly learned that corporate life wasn't for me. I hated the monotony of it all, the long hours, the endless meetings, and the feeling that I was just a cog in the machine. One day, I was at my friend Kyle's house, and he was talking about an idea he had. Kyle was a software engineer and the kind of guy who always had an idea for a new app, a new product, or a new service. But this time, it felt different. He was passionate. He was excited. He'd noticed that a lot of people were struggling to find affordable, high-quality gym gear. Things like resistance bands, dumbbells, and kettlebells, especially for people who didn't have the space or budget for a full home gym. What if there was a company that could make these products accessible, affordable, and easy to store? He pitched the idea of a subscription service for fitness equipment. You could rent gear instead of buying it, and if you wanted to buy something, you'd get a huge discount. I'll be honest, I didn't think it would work. The fitness industry was already full of big players, and I figured there was no way we could compete. But Kyle wouldn't let it go. He kept talking about it, even though neither of us had any real experience in the fitness industry. After a few weeks of talking and debating, I reluctantly agreed to help him start the business. The first few months were rough. We had no real product to sell. We didn't know anything about suppliers or manufacturers. We were just two people with a big idea and even bigger doubts. Our first break came when we found a small manufacturer overseas that could produce high-quality, lightweight dumbbells at a reasonable price. We ordered a small batch, tested it out ourselves, and then put up a basic website. The goal was to get a few customers, test the model, and refine the concept before going big. It didn't work. Not at all. We had a couple of orders, but the website wasn't optimized, the product descriptions were terrible, and we had no idea how to market our product. I remember sitting in my apartment late one night, staring at our empty order page, wondering if I had made a huge mistake. But Kyle wouldn't let me give up. He pushed me to keep going, keep tweaking, keep testing. We took a step back and reassessed the business. We knew we needed to focus on providing value, building trust, and getting people to believe in what we were doing. We revamped the website, created a content strategy around fitness tips, and started running Facebook ads targeting people who were interested in fitness and home workouts. Slowly, but surely, things started to pick up. It was still a slow grind. We had a couple of months where we made just enough to cover our costs. But we kept pushing forward, tweaking everything, our messaging, our pricing, our offers, until one day, everything clicked. The breakthrough came when we decided to try influencer marketing. I had always been skeptical of influencers, but Kyle convinced me it was the way to go. We started reaching out to fitness influencers on Instagram, offering them free gear in exchange for a review. At first, it didn't seem like much. But then one influencer, who had a relatively small following, posted a glowing review. That one post led to a surge in orders. People started trusting us. They believed in our product. From there, things really started to snowball. We invested in more inventory, improved our customer service, and scaled up our ads. We partnered with gyms and fitness trainers who promoted our service, and we started getting featured on fitness blogs and podcasts. Our customer base grew rapidly, and our reputation started to solidify. By the end of year 2, we had turned a profit. Our subscription service was thriving, and we were expanding our product offerings. What started as a small, niche idea had evolved into a full-fledged business. We even started offering our products to corporate wellness programs, where companies could offer their employees fitness equipment as part of their benefits package. But the challenges didn't stop there. As we grew, we started facing new problems. Shipping costs were rising, and the competition was starting to catch on to what we were doing. We had to stay ahead of the curve, constantly innovating and improving. We started developing our own line of branded fitness equipment, focusing on high-quality, eco-friendly materials. We also began offering personalized workout plans and coaching services, which further set us apart from other fitness companies. Our customers didn't just want the equipment. They wanted guidance, they wanted results, and they wanted a community. One of the hardest decisions I had to make was hiring the right people. As the business grew, I realized that I couldn't do it all myself. I had to build a team that could handle the day-to-day operations while Kyle and I focused on the long-term strategy. It was a huge leap of faith to let go of some control, but it was also the best decision I ever made. With a talented team in place, we were able to scale quickly and keep up with the growing demand. By the time we hit our 5th year in business, we were a 7-figure company. Our products were being shipped worldwide, and we had a loyal customer base that kept coming back for more. We had become one of the leading brands in the fitness equipment space, and I couldn't believe how far we had come. But looking back, it wasn't the money or the recognition that made it all worth it. It was the satisfaction of knowing that we had created something that made a real difference in people's lives. We were helping people stay fit, save money, and build healthier habits, something I had always wanted to do but never thought possible. As I sit here reflecting on the journey, I realize that the biggest lesson I've learned is that success doesn't happen overnight. It's about persistence, adaptability, and the willingness to keep going when things seem impossible. There were so many moments when I thought about giving up, but every time I did, Kyle would remind me of why we started. He reminded me that the journey was just as important as the destination. Now, we're at a point where we're looking to expand even further, launching new products, opening new markets, and reaching more customers. We've gone from 2 guys with an idea to a full-fledged business that's making a real impact. It hasn't been easy, but it's been the most rewarding experience of my life. And to think, it all started with a simple idea and a lot of doubt. I had always been the type of person who believed in the power of hard work. Growing up in a small town, where everyone knew each other's business, I learned the value of community, resilience, and a good reputation. My family wasn't wealthy, but we always got by. My dad worked as a mechanic, and my mom ran a small grocery store. They weren't entrepreneurs, but they were hustlers in their own right, doing whatever they could to keep the lights on and food on the table. I was lucky enough to get a scholarship to a decent college, and that's where everything started to change for me. I majored in business, and while I was there, I quickly realized that I wasn't interested in the traditional corporate path. I had no desire to climb some ladder in a cubicle, working my way up for years just to sit behind a desk. I wanted to create something real, something that would leave a mark. But that dream seemed so far away, especially with all the uncertainty surrounding me in school. Most of my classmates wanted to land the best internships with Fortune 500 companies, but I felt like I was out of place. I wanted to do something different, something risky, something that could change my life. After graduation, I moved back home to figure things out. I didn't have a clear plan, but I knew one thing. I wasn't going to play it safe. I started small, doing freelance work as a marketing consultant. I helped local businesses get online, set up social media campaigns, and improve their branding. It wasn't glamorous, but it was a start. I was able to save up enough money to take the next big step, starting my own business. I didn't know exactly what kind of business I wanted to start, but I knew I had a passion for fitness. Growing up, I wasn't a natural athlete, but I loved the way exercise made me feel. I loved how it cleared my head, built my confidence, and gave me a sense of purpose. So, I decided to open a gym. Not just any gym, though. I wanted to create a space that wasn't just about lifting weights or doing cardio. I wanted it to be a community, a place where people could go to better themselves mentally, physically, and emotionally. I spent the next few months researching the fitness industry, talking to other gym owners, and figuring out what would make my gym different. The more I learned, the more I realized that most gyms weren't offering the kind of experience I envisioned. They were either too focused on selling memberships or didn't put enough emphasis on creating a positive environment for their clients. I wanted to change that. I took the plunge and signed a lease for a small space in the town where I grew up. The location wasn't ideal, but it was affordable. I renovated the space, bought equipment, and hired a few trainers. I didn't have much of a budget, so I did most of the work myself. I painted the walls, installed the flooring, and even assembled some of the gym equipment. I knew I was going to have to wear a lot of hats: owner, manager, marketer, accountant. But I was determined to make it work. Opening day came, and I remember feeling a mixture of excitement and fear. I had no idea if anyone would show up. The marketing campaign I had put together was basic, but I relied heavily on social media and word of mouth to get the word out. I also offered a few free classes to get people through the door. To my surprise, people came. Not in droves, but enough to keep me optimistic. Slowly but surely, the gym started to pick up steam. I made it a point to interact with every client, learn their names, and understand their fitness goals. I built a community. Over time, my gym started to grow. I began offering additional classes: yoga, spin, and strength training. I hired more trainers to cover the demand, and I kept focusing on creating a positive, welcoming atmosphere. But the biggest shift happened when I realized I needed to step back from the day-to-day operations. I couldn't do everything myself if I wanted the business to scale. It was a hard decision. Letting go of control felt like I was abandoning the thing I had built. But I hired a general manager and shifted my focus to growing the business. That's when I started experimenting with new ideas. I launched an online training program, offering virtual fitness coaching for clients who couldn't make it to the gym. I also created a mobile app that allowed clients to track their workouts, set goals, and get advice from trainers. The online side of the business took off, and soon I had clients from all over the country. I had underestimated the demand for fitness solutions that people could access from the comfort of their own homes. The more I learned about online fitness, the more I realized the potential for growth. I started to develop a series of fitness products, supplements, workout gear, and even my own branded apparel. It wasn't easy. I faced setbacks along the way, from supplier issues to financial struggles. But every obstacle was an opportunity to learn and adapt. I built strong relationships with manufacturers, learned about e-commerce, and honed my marketing skills. One of the toughest moments came when I was hit with a massive setback: COVID-19. The gym had to close for several months, and my revenue took a huge hit. It felt like everything I had worked for was slipping through my fingers. But I wasn't ready to give up. I quickly shifted to an online model, offering virtual classes and personal training sessions over Zoom. I reached out to my community and offered discounts to loyal members. People appreciated the effort, and many stuck with me through the tough times. Eventually, things started to stabilize. The gym reopened with new health protocols, and the online side of the business continued to thrive. I had managed to survive one of the most challenging times in the history of small businesses. I had learned the importance of flexibility, resilience, and staying connected to your community. As the years went on, my business grew in ways I hadn't imagined. What started as a small, local gym blossomed into a national fitness brand. My gym became a franchise, and my online platform expanded to offer everything from fitness programs to nutrition coaching. I had built something I was proud of, something that had an impact on people's lives. Looking back, I can hardly believe how far I've come. It hasn't been easy, and there were times when I doubted myself. But each failure, each obstacle, and each setback was part of the journey. I learned that success isn't about avoiding failure, it's about how you respond to it. Now, I'm focused on giving back. I mentor aspiring entrepreneurs, helping them navigate the challenges of starting and growing a business. I've learned so much along the way, and I'm committed to sharing those lessons with others. If there's one thing I've learned, it's this: it's never too late to start. The road will be long, and it will be hard. But if you have a vision and the determination to see it through, anything is possible. The key is to keep going, even when it seems like everything is stacked against you. Believe in yourself, trust the process, and never stop learning. The journey is worth it. I was 22 years old when I first stumbled into the world of entrepreneurship, and to be honest, I had no idea what I was doing. It started with a small, seemingly innocent idea, creating a custom t-shirt business. This was back in 2017, when print-on-demand services were just beginning to pick up steam, and everyone was talking about how easy it was to make money with minimal effort. Of course, I didn't know much about business, but it sounded like a golden ticket. I had just graduated college, and I was working a part-time job at a local coffee shop to make ends meet. My parents had always been supportive, but they were cautious, urging me to find a steady job with benefits. I'd been applying to every marketing job I could find, but the constant rejection letters were beginning to chip away at my confidence. Then, one night, after scrolling through Instagram and seeing some ads for custom shirts, it clicked. Why not try it? I had a few $100 saved up from my coffee shop gig, and what's the worst that could happen? I started doing some research, watching countless YouTube videos and reading articles about setting up an online store. It was all new to me. I learned about Shopify, about choosing the right print-on-demand company, and about designing. At the time, I thought my designs were amazing, simple phrases or logos that I thought people would love. The first couple of designs I made were awful, but I didn't know that yet. The first step was launching the store. I made a Shopify account and spent hours customizing the website. It wasn't perfect, but I thought it looked good. I even bought a domain name, which felt like a huge investment. With everything set up, I started uploading my designs. The first night I launched, I felt like I was on top of the world. It didn't matter that I had no sales, no traffic, and no real clue what I was doing. I had started. I was officially an entrepreneur. Over the next few weeks, I realized how much work it was going to take. I didn't have a marketing budget, so I relied on Instagram and Facebook ads. The results were dismal. I had a few clicks here and there, but no sales. I didn't know it at the time, but I was setting myself up for failure by targeting the wrong audience and creating terrible ads. I also learned the hard way that designing cool t-shirts doesn't necessarily mean people are going to buy them. Just because I thought they were amazing didn't mean anyone else did. After a month of no sales, I was about to give up. I had spent money on ads, designed new shirts, and shared posts with no results. I was feeling defeated. That's when my best friend, Jenna, stepped in. She had always been a go-getter, the kind of person who seemed to be good at everything she tried. We were sitting at a cafe one afternoon, and I was venting about how I was ready to quit. She told me to give it one more try. She also suggested that I stop focusing on what I thought was cool and instead listen to what people actually wanted. At first, I didn't get it. What do you mean, listen to what people want? I thought it was about being unique, about standing out with my designs. But Jenna, who worked in social media marketing, explained that I needed to tap into a niche and create something that resonated with a specific audience. I had been creating random t-shirt designs, but I didn't know who I was targeting. I needed to find a community of people who would be passionate about the designs. That's when the shift happened. I started diving into niche communities on Reddit and Facebook groups. I realized that people were incredibly passionate about specific interests, from dog lovers to gamers to fitness enthusiasts. It wasn't about creating something that I thought was cool. It was about speaking directly to people who cared about that particular thing. I focused on creating designs around these niches, and I started testing ads again, but this time, I was laser-focused on targeting the right audience. A month later, I made my first sale. It wasn't much, a single t-shirt, but it was a sale. I felt like I had cracked the code. I used the profits to reinvest into more targeted ads, and slowly but surely, sales started coming in. I realized that I needed to focus on building a brand, not just a random store. I wanted people to feel connected to my designs, to see them as something more than just a t-shirt. I started engaging with my customers more, asking for their feedback, and making them feel like part of the process. But even as the sales started trickling in, the business was far from smooth sailing. One day, I received an email from my print-on-demand provider saying that there was a problem with one of my orders. Apparently, one of my designs didn't meet the quality standards, and the order was being canceled. I was devastated. It wasn't just the canceled order, it was the realization that I didn't have full control over the product quality. That's when I realized that relying on third-party suppliers wasn't a long-term solution if I wanted to build a sustainable business. That's when I made the jump from print-on-demand to creating my own inventory. It wasn't easy, and it took a lot of research, but I started sourcing shirts, printing them in bulk, and handling fulfillment myself. It was risky and costly, but it gave me full control over the quality and the branding. I hired a part-time employee to help with shipping, and I slowly started growing. I invested in better advertising, built a mailing list, and continued refining my designs. Fast forward 3 years, and my small t-shirt shop had turned into a full-fledged clothing brand. I wasn't just selling shirts anymore. I had expanded into hoodies, hats, and other accessories. I hired a small team to help with customer service and design, and I was running my business full-time. The profits were finally consistent, and I had managed to pay off all the debt I had accumulated along the way. It wasn't easy, and there were countless sleepless nights, but I had built something that I was proud of. Looking back, I can't believe how far I've come. There were so many times I wanted to quit. There were so many moments of doubt, frustration, and failure. But I learned that being an entrepreneur isn't about having all the answers from the start. It's about learning, adjusting, and pushing through the tough times. Now, I'm not just running a business. I'm building something that has the potential to grow for years to come. And to think, it all started with a simple idea and a few $100. Hey, friends, if you enjoy this content, don't forget to like the video and share your thoughts in the comments. We really want to know what you like and what can be improved. What do you think of the video? Are there any topics you'd like to see in future videos? Your feedback really helps us get better. Thanks for being with us. I started my entrepreneurial journey when I was just 23. Fresh out of college with a degree in business administration, I had all these dreams and ideas swirling in my head. I thought I had it all figured out. I had my vision, and all I needed was the right opportunity. The problem was, I had no money, no experience, and honestly, no clue how to make it happen. But like any good entrepreneur, I was stubborn. I decided to launch an online store, selling products I felt passionate about. At the time, I didn't know much about the e-commerce world, but I figured, how hard could it be? I spent months researching, picking the right niche, and setting up a website. I remember the thrill of launching it, like I had just created something amazing that the world was going to love. I sat there waiting for sales to flood in. The first week passed, and nothing. No sales. Not even a single click. I thought it was a fluke. Maybe the website wasn't ranking well on Google, or people just needed time to find it. So, I gave it another week. Still nothing. By this time, I started doubting myself. Maybe I had made the wrong choice. Maybe I wasn't cut out for this. But I had put too much into this idea, and I wasn't ready to quit yet. I turned to the internet for answers. I read every article I could find on growing an online business. I joined online forums, subscribed to newsletters, and even reached out to other entrepreneurs who seemed to be successful. Slowly, I began to understand that running a successful business wasn't just about having a great product. It was about marketing, understanding your audience, and constantly evolving. After a couple of months of hard work, I started to see some small progress. I realized my website wasn't optimized for search engines, so I took time to fix that. I began writing blog posts related to my niche, hoping to drive traffic through search. I also started running small Facebook ads targeting specific demographics. While my sales weren't massive, they were growing, and that was enough to keep me going. But then the real challenge came, managing inventory. I had started out small, ordering just a few products to test the market, but as sales picked up, I realized I couldn't keep up. I didn't have the funds to invest in bulk inventory, and I didn't want to risk holding too much stock in case my products didn't sell. It felt like a catch-22. I needed more products to sell, but I couldn't afford to order them until I sold more. This is when I hit a major turning point. I stumbled upon the concept of dropshipping, which was a game changer for me. Instead of buying products up front and managing a warehouse, I could sell products directly from suppliers. They would handle inventory and shipping, and I wouldn't have to worry about upfront costs. It sounded too good to be true, but I decided to give it a shot. I switched my business model to dropshipping, and that's when things really started to take off. My sales began to climb, and I could focus on marketing and customer experience without the stress of handling inventory. For the first time, I felt like I had a real business. I even started outsourcing some of the tasks I didn't enjoy, like customer service and managing returns, so I could focus more on scaling the business. But, of course, things didn't stay easy for long. As the business grew, so did the competition. I started seeing other dropshipping stores pop up selling the same products I was offering. Suddenly, my profit margins were being squeezed. My ads weren't performing as well, and I had to figure out how to stand out in an overcrowded market. I knew I needed to pivot. I needed to offer something that nobody else had. So, I spent months brainstorming new ideas, conducting surveys, and researching new trends. Eventually, I decided to create my own line of products. ones that were unique to my brand. I worked with manufacturers to create custom products, and this time, I had control over quality, packaging, and branding. That move paid off big time. My sales skyrocketed. The uniqueness of my products gave me an edge over the competition, and my branding resonated with my audience. People didn't just buy my products. They were buying into my story. They connected with the fact that I had started from nothing, struggled, and finally made it. Fast forward a few years, and my business is now a multi-six-figure operation. I have a team of employees and freelancers who help manage different aspects of the business. I've built an email list of thousands of customers, and I've expanded into new markets. I'm no longer just an entrepreneur trying to figure things out. I'm a business owner, and it feels incredible. But despite all the success, I still look back at those early days with gratitude. The sleepless nights, the moments of self-doubt, the countless failures, they were all necessary. Without them, I wouldn't be where I am today. I learned more from my mistakes than from my victories, and I think that's true for every entrepreneur. Today, I'm more focused on giving back. I mentor young entrepreneurs, help them avoid the mistakes I made, and share what I've learned. I started a podcast and an online course to teach others how to grow their own businesses. I never imagined I'd be in this position, but I'm grateful every day that I took the risk. Looking back, I realized something important. Entrepreneurship isn't about having a perfect plan. It's about being willing to try, to fail, and to adapt. There were so many times I could have thrown in the towel, but I didn't. And now, I have a thriving business that supports my lifestyle and helps others along the way. Would I have done anything differently? Maybe. But those early struggles taught me lessons I could never have learned from success alone. If you're an aspiring entrepreneur, don't be afraid to fail. Embrace the setbacks, learn from them, and keep going. Your story could be the next one that inspires someone else to take the leap. I started my entrepreneurial journey when I was 25 years old, living in a small apartment in Brooklyn. At the time, I was working a 9-to-5 job in marketing for a mid-sized firm, which, to be honest, was draining the life out of me. Every day felt the same: get up, work, come home, repeat. I knew I wanted something different but had no idea what that something would be. What I did know was that I wasn't cut out for corporate life, and I wanted to build something of my own. I spent months brainstorming ideas. I tried to come up with a product, a service, or an app that would solve a major problem. I had nothing to lose, but at the same time, I was terrified of failing. The thought of throwing away the steady paycheck and the stability of a 9-to-5 job kept me in a constant state of indecision. One evening, I was talking to my best friend, Sarah, over a beer. I remember complaining about how uninspiring my job had become and how I needed something to jumpstart my creativity. That's when she said something that would change everything. Why don't you start a business doing something you actually enjoy? It was so simple, yet I had never thought about it that way. I loved fitness, and I'd been working out since my college days. I also knew how hard it was for people to find quality fitness advice online. Most fitness influencers were promoting products and supplements that didn't really work, and I could see how the industry was lacking trustworthy resources for people who genuinely wanted to improve their health. At that moment, I made a decision. I was going to start a fitness website, a platform where people could access science-backed workout routines, nutrition tips, and honest product reviews. I knew it wouldn't be easy, but I also knew that if I didn't give it a shot, I would regret it forever. The next few weeks were a blur. I quit my job, used most of my savings to register a domain and hire a small team of freelance writers, and started creating content. At first, things were rough. The website had very little traffic, and I was struggling to get noticed in a saturated market. But I didn't give up. I spent countless hours reading about SEO, search engine optimization, studying my competitors, and experimenting with different ways to grow my audience. I reached out to influencers, tried affiliate marketing, and worked on building a social media presence. Then came a breakthrough. One of my blog posts went viral. It was an in-depth guide on the best protein powders for women. I had done extensive research, compared various products, and shared my honest opinions. The post gained traction on social media, and traffic to my site shot up. That one piece of content became my calling card. People started recognizing me as a reliable source for fitness advice, and I began to get messages from companies asking me to promote their products. My email inbox exploded. By the end of my first year, my business was starting to pick up. I was making money through affiliate marketing and sponsored content. The traffic was growing steadily, and I was beginning to form partnerships with brands I truly believed in. However, despite the progress, I still faced a lot of challenges. The biggest hurdle was scaling the business. I had a small team of freelancers, but I quickly realized that to grow beyond a certain point, I needed to build a full-time team. That's when I decided to take the plunge again. I put more of my savings into hiring full-time employees, which was terrifying. But it was a necessary risk if I wanted to take my business to the next level. My team and I worked tirelessly, launching new features on the website, creating video content, and refining our social media strategy. Slowly but surely, we started to make a name for ourselves in the industry. But success didn't come without its setbacks. In my second year, I made a costly mistake. I partnered with a supplement company that I thought would align with my values. But after a few months, I discovered their products were subpar and their business practices were questionable. The partnership ended up backfiring, and I had to deal with a lot of negative feedback from my audience. It was a huge blow, but it taught me an invaluable lesson. Never compromise your integrity for short-term gains. After that experience, I focused even more on authenticity and transparency. I refused to promote any products that I didn't fully believe in. I also started diversifying my revenue streams. Instead of relying solely on affiliate marketing and sponsored posts, I began creating my own fitness programs and selling them directly on the website. This turned out to be a game changer. The more I invested in creating my own products, the more I saw the potential for long-term growth. I launched a subscription-based service where users could access personalized workout plans, diet guides, and weekly coaching calls. This provided a steady stream of recurring revenue, and it allowed me to engage directly with my community in ways I hadn't before. The members of my platform started seeing real results, and their success stories became the driving force behind my business. As the years went on, I found myself not only running a successful business but also building a community of like-minded individuals. My website had grown into a hub for fitness enthusiasts, and I was becoming a thought leader in the industry. The more I connected with my audience, the more motivated I became to help them achieve their fitness goals. It wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about making a real difference in people's lives. Fast forward to today, and my business has expanded beyond my wildest expectations. I've hired a talented team of full-time employees, launched a mobile app, and even started a podcast where I interview experts in health and fitness. I've also built partnerships with some of the top brands in the industry, which allows me to continue providing value to my audience. My revenue streams are diversified, and I'm more financially stable than I ever imagined. Looking back, I can't believe how far I've come. There were so many times I doubted myself and wanted to quit, but I kept pushing forward. If there's one thing I've learned throughout this entire journey, it's that consistency, integrity, and passion are the keys to success. Building a business is never easy, but if you stay true to your mission and keep moving forward, the rewards are worth it. I still remember those early days of struggling to get my website noticed and feeling like I was wasting my time. But now, I'm proud of the impact I've made and the life I've created. And the best part? I'm just getting started. I was 25 when I started my business. I had no experience, no mentors, no savings, and no real direction. All I had was a burning desire to make something of myself. It started like this. I was working at a corporate job that I hated, barely scraping by with a paycheck that was never enough. I had big dreams, but no clue how to achieve them. At that time, I thought success was reserved for people with connections, wealth, or some sort of special talent. I was wrong. It was a random Thursday when I came across a post on Reddit about side hustles. It was the kind of post that gets buried under 1,000 others, but for some reason, it stuck with me. The guy was talking about starting a dropshipping business. He explained how anyone could do it, as long as they were willing to put in the time and effort to learn. I didn't know what dropshipping was, but I started researching it immediately. I watched YouTube videos, read blog posts, and joined online communities. I was obsessed. The concept seemed simple. You set up an online store, list products from suppliers, and when someone buys, the supplier ships the product directly to the customer. No inventory, no shipping hassles. I thought, if this guy can do it, so can I. I spent the next few months learning everything I could. I decided to focus on a niche that I knew well, pet products. I had grown up with dogs and was passionate about helping pet owners find cool products for their furry friends. I came up with a name for my online store, built the website, and then went to work finding suppliers. It wasn't easy. I made countless mistakes along the way. I struggled with setting up the website, picking the right products, and marketing. I spent way too much time on things that didn't matter, like choosing the perfect font for my logo or obsessing over the color scheme. I was paralyzed by perfectionism. But eventually, I launched my store. The first few weeks were slow. I didn't make any sales, and I started to question whether I was wasting my time. I realized that just launching a website wasn't enough. I needed to drive traffic to it. I learned about Facebook ads and Google ads, and spent a good chunk of my savings testing different ad campaigns. I was burning through money, and nothing seemed to work. Then one night, I had a breakthrough. I was reading an article about how to create compelling ads when I had an idea. Instead of just showing pictures of the products, why not show real dogs using them? I could create ads that were more emotional and relatable to pet owners. It was a small shift, but it changed everything. I spent the next few days creating a few ad variations with real pets and launched them. Within days, I started seeing sales come in. The feeling was indescribable. I had worked so hard for this moment, and now it was finally happening. But as soon as I made my first sale, I realized that the work was just beginning. The next challenge was scaling. As orders started coming in, I needed to figure out how to handle the logistics. I had no experience with customer service, so I spent countless hours responding to emails, tracking shipments, and dealing with angry customers who were upset about delayed shipments or damaged products. I learned to be patient, diplomatic, and most importantly, responsive. I also had to learn how to manage my finances. I had no formal business training, so I made a lot of mistakes early on. I didn't track expenses properly, and I wasn't always reinvesting my profits wisely. But I kept learning. I joined mastermind groups, hired mentors, and devoured business books. Slowly, I started to get a handle on things. 1 year into my business, things were starting to look good. My revenue was growing steadily, and I was starting to see real profits. But I also realized something important. I had been so focused on the product side of things that I had neglected the brand. My store didn't stand out. There were 1,000 other stores selling similar products, and I needed to figure out how to make mine different. So, I decided to rebrand. I spent a lot of time studying successful e-commerce brands and how they connected with their customers. I realized that my brand needed to tell a story that pet owners could relate to. So, I changed the name, revamped the logo, and completely redesigned the website. The rebrand wasn't just cosmetic. I also shifted my focus. I started offering content that resonated with my customers, like blog posts about pet care, funny dog videos, and heartwarming stories about pets. I created a sense of community around my brand. It wasn't just about selling products anymore. It was about creating an experience. The rebrand worked. My sales skyrocketed, and I started to build a loyal following. I was no longer just a dropshipping store. I was a brand that people trusted and loved. But success didn't come without new challenges. As the business grew, I had to hire employees, outsource tasks, and deal with the complexities of scaling a business. I learned how to delegate, how to manage a team, and how to keep my vision intact while allowing others to help carry the load. Looking back now, I'm amazed at how far I've come. My business has grown from a side hustle to a full-fledged company, and it's changed my life in ways I never imagined. I'm no longer stuck in a corporate job that drains the life out of me. I'm living my dream. But I also know that none of this would have happened if I hadn't taken that first leap into the unknown. If I could give advice to anyone starting out, it would be this: you don't need to have it all figured out. Just start. You'll make mistakes, you'll fail, and you'll want to give up. But if you keep pushing forward, learning, and adapting, success will follow. I'm living proof that anyone, no matter where they start, can build something amazing with enough determination and the willingness to learn. It's not easy, but it's worth it. If I can do it, so can you. I was 23 years old, fresh out of college with a degree in business administration, and feeling the weight of the world on my shoulders. Like most people my age, I had no clue what I was doing. The world seemed both full of opportunities and full of traps, and I didn't have a roadmap. I did what most people do at that age. I took a few dead-end jobs that I didn't care about, trying to find some meaning, but mostly trying to pay the bills. I worked as a barista, then as an assistant at a marketing agency, and even had a short stint as a sales rep for a company that sold office supplies. At the time, my parents were still supportive, though they were starting to get anxious. "Why don't you just get a real job?" my mom would ask. "You went to college. You have a degree. Don't waste time with these low-paying, dead-end gigs." But the truth was, I didn't know what a real job was supposed to look like. I felt stuck. just following the motions of adulthood without any clear direction. One night, after a particularly frustrating day at work where I had been yelled at by a client for something that wasn't my fault, I did what any frustrated 23-year-old would do. I went home, cracked open a beer, and spent the next few hours scrolling through Instagram. That's when I saw it. A post from one of those inspirational accounts with a picture of a small, tidy apartment in what looked like the heart of New York City. The caption was simple but gut-punching. Turn your passion into profit. Start small. You don't need millions to get started. I stared at that caption for way longer than I probably should have. It hit me like a ton of bricks. I had always wanted to be an entrepreneur, but I had never believed that I could actually be one. I didn't have the money, the experience, or any contacts in the business world. But that post, that simple phrase, stuck with me. I thought, maybe it wasn't too late. Maybe I could do it. For the next few weeks, I spent all my free time researching. I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I knew that I had to do something. I tried to think about what I was good at, what skills I had, and how I could turn them into a business. The thing was, I wasn't a genius in anything. I wasn't a tech wizard, a designer, or a professional writer. But I was good at making connections, at talking to people, at understanding what people wanted. One evening, it hit me. What if I started a small online business helping local restaurants and small businesses with social media marketing? I didn't need to be an expert. I could learn as I went. I already knew the basics from my time working at the marketing agency and through hours of self-learning on YouTube and other online courses. I also knew that most small businesses didn't know how to leverage social media properly. They just posted random things and hoped for the best. What they needed was someone who could guide them, who could help them craft a strategy that would grow their brand. I still remember the moment I decided to take the leap. I was sitting at my desk, staring at a blank Google Doc titled Business Plan, and I realized I had two choices. I could keep playing it safe, working in jobs that drained me but paid the bills, or I could take a chance and start something of my own. I sent a message to a few local businesses I had frequented, places I liked, where I felt a personal connection. I told them I could help them build their brand on social media. I didn't have a fancy website or portfolio. I just had my ideas and my enthusiasm. The first response came a few days later from a local bakery I had visited a few times. They were interested but wanted to know how I could help them specifically. I sent them a proposal. I would handle their Instagram and Facebook accounts, create content, and run paid ads for $500 a month. It wasn't a lot, but it was enough to get me started. They agreed. I'll never forget that first moment of victory, the feeling of having secured my first client. I was nervous as hell, but I also had a newfound energy that kept me up late every night working on their social media. I took pictures of their pastries, created posts with clever captions, and ran ads targeting local customers. Slowly but surely, their online presence grew. They started getting more foot traffic, and after a month, they were thrilled. They asked me to continue working with them, and even referred me to a few other local businesses. From there, things snowballed. One successful campaign led to another, and soon I had more clients than I could handle on my own. I hired a small team of freelancers to help with content creation, and I built a simple website showcasing my work. I even started attending local networking events, where I met other entrepreneurs who helped me grow my business. I went from earning $500 a month to earning $500 a month in just a year. But the real turning point came when I made a bold decision. I wanted to scale. I wanted to build a real agency, one that could compete with the big players in the market. I invested in online courses about business scaling, hired a business coach, and began reinvesting every penny I made back into the business. I developed a system that allowed me to manage multiple clients at once while delivering high-quality work. It wasn't easy. There were moments of self-doubt, times when clients were unhappy, and months when I barely made enough to cover my bills. But I kept pushing through. Slowly, my reputation grew, and eventually, I secured contracts with larger businesses. I started hiring full-time employees, and before I knew it, I had a full-fledged digital marketing agency. We were helping companies from all over the country improve their social media presence and grow their brands. Looking back, it's hard to believe how far I've come. There were times when I wanted to quit, when I felt like a failure, when I didn't think I could keep going. But I kept telling myself that if others could do it, so could I. And now, 5 years later, I'm proud to say that my business is thriving. I've built a life I never thought was possible, and I've learned more than I ever could have imagined. If there's one thing I've learned, it's that you don't need millions of dollars, a fancy degree, or a long list of connections to start a successful business. You just need a willingness to learn, the courage to take risks, and the persistence to keep going, even when it seems like you'll never make it. It won't be easy, but if you stick with it, you'll get there. The most important thing, though, don't wait for the perfect moment to start. It won't ever come. Just take the leap and figure it out as you go. That's what I did, and it worked. I grew up in a small town in the Midwest, where the idea of entrepreneurship seemed like something only the wealthy or the well-connected could achieve. My parents were hardworking people, but they weren't business owners. My dad worked as a mechanic, and my mom was a school teacher. We didn't have a lot of extra money growing up, but we had enough to get by. I remember the day that I first got the spark. I was 15, and I had just started mowing lawns for a few neighbors to make some extra pocket money. At first, it was just a way to buy a new video game or some clothes. But one day, while I was mowing a lawn for Mrs. Bennett, the neighbor who lived a few houses down, she asked me something that changed my perspective completely. "You know," Mrs. Bennett said, "you could really make a business out of this. You're reliable, and you do a good job." I remember feeling a mix of excitement and doubt. Me? A business owner? At that age, I had no clue how to start a business. But her words stuck with me. Over the next few weeks, I started thinking about it more and more. I had already been working for a few months, and I realized I could offer something more than just lawn mowing. I could provide a full range of lawn care services. I spent the next few days researching everything I could about landscaping, equipment, and running a business. It was a lot of late nights, sitting in front of my old desktop computer, browsing forums, and reading articles. I learned how to create a business plan, how to get clients, and most importantly, how to charge for my services. The biggest hurdle was the equipment. I didn't have a lot of money, so I couldn't afford brand new, high-end gear. But I found a used lawnmower for $150 from a neighbor who was upgrading to a better model. The mower was old and had seen better days, but it ran. I figured if I could make it work, it would be a solid start. I officially launched my business in the summer of 2011. I called it Green Thumb Lawn Care. The first month was slow. I had only a couple of clients, and the work was harder than I expected. But each time I finished a job, I was filled with this immense sense of accomplishment. I felt proud of what I was doing, even if it was just mowing grass. I started getting the hang of it. I learned how to market my business, how to talk to potential clients, and how to provide excellent customer service. Over time, my business grew. I started offering additional services like weed control, garden maintenance, and even snow removal in the winter. I raised my prices gradually, always making sure to provide value in return. I learned the hard way that undercharging just leads to burnout. By the time I graduated high school in 2013, my lawn care business was making a steady income. I had built a small customer base, and people were starting to refer me to their friends. But I wasn't content with just being a small-town lawn care guy. I wanted more. In 2014, I made a risky decision. I decided to take out a loan to expand my business. I needed a commercial-grade lawnmower, a truck to haul everything, and more tools to diversify my services. It was a huge leap, but I knew it was the right move. I was no longer just a teenager mowing lawns. I was running a business, and it was time to treat it like one. The next few years were tough. I had to learn how to manage employees, deal with taxes, and handle the logistics of scheduling jobs. I faced more than a few sleepless nights, trying to figure out how to juggle everything. But it was all worth it. My business was growing, and I started branching out into other areas, including landscape design and hardscaping. By 2016, I had hired my first full-time employee. His name was Mike, and he was a local guy who had been working with me part-time for a while. I trusted him, and he was a hard worker. Hiring Mike was a big step because it meant I needed to take on more work to keep the business profitable. But having help meant I could take on bigger projects and provide better service to my growing client base. Around this time, I started experimenting with marketing. I had a website built, set up a Facebook page, and even created some ads on Google. I also began offering seasonal discounts, referral bonuses, and loyalty programs. The goal was always to keep customers happy, so they would come back and recommend me to their friends. By 2018, my lawn care company had become one of the most well-known in the area. I had a team of 5 employees, a fleet of trucks, and enough business to keep us busy year-round. It wasn't just about mowing lawns anymore. We were designing landscapes, installing patios, creating outdoor kitchens, and even building custom fire pits. We were known for our quality work, and word-of-mouth referrals were driving much of our business. But just when things were looking up, disaster struck. In the winter of 2019, we had a particularly harsh season, and snow removal was a major part of our business. A blizzard hit, and our trucks were out in full force, clearing driveways and parking lots. One of my trucks, a key part of our fleet, broke down during the storm. The repair costs were astronomical, and it left us with fewer vehicles to handle the rest of the work. We lost out on several big contracts that season, and it set us back financially. I thought about throwing in the towel. It was a crushing blow, and I had never experienced anything like it. But I refused to give up. I worked out a payment plan with the mechanic, restructured our business to lower costs, and worked overtime to make up the lost revenue. It wasn't easy, but by the end of 2020, we had recovered. Today, Green Thumb Lawn Care is thriving more than ever. We've expanded to multiple locations in the region and have a growing list of commercial clients. My team is solid, and we've built a reputation as one of the best in the industry. I look back at the years of hard work and sacrifices, and while it hasn't been easy, I wouldn't change a thing. The journey from mowing lawns for pocket money to running a successful landscaping business has been filled with lessons and challenges. But the most important lesson I've learned is this. Entrepreneurship is not about having the perfect plan or the best circumstances. It's about being willing to work hard, adapt when things go wrong, and never give up. Success doesn't happen overnight, but with perseverance, you can achieve things you never thought possible. I'm proud of what I've built, and I'm just getting started. Looking back, I realized that all those late nights researching, those tough days when I thought about quitting, and the financial struggles were worth it. Entrepreneurship is not for the faint of heart, but if you've got the grit to keep going, it can be the most rewarding thing you'll ever do. I was just a regular guy, living in a small town in the Midwest. My life wasn't anything spectacular, but it was comfortable. I had a steady job as a project manager at a tech company, a modest apartment, and a couple of good friends. Nothing to complain about, but nothing to write home about either. But one thing I had, maybe even more than most people, was a burning curiosity about how things worked, particularly in business. Growing up, I was always fascinated by entrepreneurs. I devoured stories about people who started with nothing and built empires from the ground up. I admired the hustle, the vision, the unwavering belief in oneself. It was something I always wanted to experience for myself. But like most people, I figured I'd never have the guts to actually take the plunge. I was content with my steady job and just daydreamed about what could be. That is until the day I stumbled across a random article on a news website. It was a short piece about a guy who had started a small tech company out of his garage, and now, 5 years later, he was selling it for millions. The story was inspiring, but what caught my attention most was the casual tone of it. The guy wasn't some unreachable genius. He was a regular guy who had made a decision, worked his butt off, and made something amazing happen. I remember sitting there thinking, why not me? At the time, I had no idea what I wanted to build. I wasn't some tech wizard, I wasn't a marketing guru, and I certainly wasn't rich. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that I had something that a lot of people didn't time. I wasn't married, I didn't have kids, and my expenses were low. I figured I had nothing to lose. So, I took a leap of faith and decided to start my own company. Now, I know it sounds like I just jumped in headfirst without any idea what I was doing, but that's not entirely true. I spent months researching, reading books, listening to podcasts, and trying to learn as much as I could. I started small, really small. I didn't have any big ideas for a new tech product or service, so I began offering simple project management services to small businesses. It wasn't glamorous, but it was a start. I worked out of my apartment at first, building a website, creating a LinkedIn profile, and reaching out to potential clients. At the beginning, it was just me and my laptop. The first few months were tough. I didn't get much business, and the clients I did land were often small, one-time gigs that barely paid enough to cover my costs. But I kept at it. I knew that if I could just build a little reputation and network, things would start picking up. Slowly but surely, they did. By the end of my first year, I had managed to build a small client base, and I was making enough to cover my bills. It wasn't much, but it was enough to give me the confidence to keep going. I hired a couple of contractors to help with the workload, and I invested in better tools to improve efficiency. I was starting to see the potential, but I knew that to really grow, I had to think bigger. I started brainstorming ways to scale my business. I realized that project management was a service that almost every business needed, but they didn't always know how to execute it effectively. That's when I had my breakthrough moment. Why not create a software tool that helped small businesses manage their projects more efficiently? At first, the idea seemed insane. I wasn't a developer, I had no idea how to code, and I certainly didn't have the money to build a full-fledged software platform. But after doing more research and speaking with people in the industry, I realized that there were a lot of existing tools out there that weren't quite hitting the mark for smaller businesses. Most of them were too expensive or too complex. That's when I knew I had an opportunity. I found a freelance developer who was willing to work with me on a limited budget, and we started building the first version of the software. It was a slow process, and we hit a lot of roadblocks along the way. I didn't know anything about coding, so I relied heavily on the developer's expertise, but we had some miscommunication issues. I didn't always know how to explain what I wanted, and sometimes he didn't fully understand the user experience I was envisioning. But we pushed through. After months of development, we launched the first version of the software. It was bare bones, but it worked. And shockingly, people actually started using it. I was amazed. But, as with anything in business, the real work was just beginning. I started marketing the product through social media, email campaigns, and cold outreach. Slowly, word started spreading, and businesses began signing up for the tool. It wasn't an overnight success, but every new user felt like a victory. The feedback we received helped us improve the product. It wasn't perfect, and we were constantly adding new features, fixing bugs, and refining the user interface. But over time, it began to resonate with small business owners, and our customer base grew steadily. By the end of year 2, we had a fully functioning product, a growing customer base, and a small but solid team. I was no longer just offering project management services, I was running a business that provided a software solution to help other businesses thrive. It was surreal, but I had learned so much along the way. But, as with all stories of success, there was one big challenge ahead of me: competition. As we grew, bigger companies started to notice our product, and some of them started building similar tools. I had always known this day would come, but it didn't make it any less terrifying. Suddenly, we weren't the only game in town, and I realized I had to evolve or risk getting left behind. Instead of panicking, I leaned into the one thing that had gotten me this far: my adaptability. We made our product even more tailored to the unique needs of small businesses. We focused on customer service, offering hands-on training and support. We engaged with our community, creating content that helped business owners solve problems beyond just using our software. 3 years into my entrepreneurial journey, the company had grown significantly, and we were generating enough revenue to attract the attention of investors. I had come a long way from my humble beginnings in my apartment, and I couldn't have done it without the constant support of my team and the lessons I had learned along the way. The company didn't become a multi-million-dollar business overnight. It took years of hard work, sacrifice, and learning from failure. But eventually, I reached a point where I was able to exit and sell the company for a substantial amount. The journey wasn't easy, and it wasn't always glamorous, but it was the most rewarding thing I've ever done. Looking back, I can't help but smile. I was just a regular guy with no clear path, but I chose to take a risk, to believe in myself, and to learn along the way. It was a journey filled with ups and downs, and I wouldn't trade it for anything. A little over 5 years ago, I was just another 27-year-old stuck in the corporate grind. I had a decent job at a tech startup that paid the bills, but I always felt like I was meant for something more. Every morning, I would drag myself out of bed, make my coffee, and sit in traffic, heading to an office I didn't feel inspired by. I felt like I was living in autopilot, spending my days working on tasks that didn't light me up. I wanted more freedom, more control over my time, and, above all, the opportunity to build something of my own. But, at the time, I had no idea what that something could be. I didn't have a big idea or a groundbreaking product in mind. I just knew I needed to make a change. So, I did what most people would do in my shoes. I started reading books, listening to podcasts, and diving into everything related to entrepreneurship. I had no technical background, no business experience, and not a penny to my name when it came to savings. But I knew I had a fire in me, and I believed that with enough hustle and persistence, I could figure things out. A few months later, I found myself sitting in a cafe with a friend who ran a small e-commerce business. He was telling me how he had built his brand from the ground up, starting with nothing but a simple idea. That conversation sparked something in me. I remember thinking, I could do this too. The thing was, I didn't know what kind of business I wanted to create. I spent weeks brainstorming ideas, flipping through countless notebooks filled with half-baked concepts. Nothing felt right. I wasn't passionate about creating an app or launching an online clothing store. Fitness, food, fashion, they all felt overdone. It wasn't until I started looking into the health and wellness space that I stumbled upon something that clicked: personal care. I had always been a bit of a skincare junkie, obsessed with finding products that worked for my sensitive skin. I tried everything from high-end serums to drugstore lotions, and while I found some that were decent, nothing seemed perfect. That's when it hit me. Why not create a skincare line that focused on people with sensitive skin, people like me, who felt left behind by the mainstream beauty industry? At first, it sounded insane. I had no experience in skincare or beauty products, and the market was already flooded with huge players. But I couldn't shake the idea. I started researching, reading ingredient lists, learning about formulations, and understanding what actually made a skincare product effective. I reached out to dermatologists, chemists, and even other entrepreneurs in the beauty industry, asking questions and soaking up everything I could. I spent the next few months working on creating a product that I believed in, a skincare line that was 100% natural, free from harsh chemicals, and focused on delivering real results for sensitive skin. My first product? A simple moisturizer. I worked with a lab to formulate a product that was gentle but effective. The packaging was sleek and minimal, reflecting the values I wanted the brand to stand for: simplicity, transparency, and sustainability. But there was one problem. I didn't have the money to bring this product to life. I was still living paycheck to paycheck, and launching a skincare brand was going to require a significant upfront investment. I didn't have any investors, and I wasn't ready to take on debt. So, I did what any resourceful entrepreneur would do. I bootstrapped. I started by selling small batches of my moisturizer to friends and family. I set up a simple website using Shopify and began marketing through social media. At first, it was slow. I only sold a few units a month, but I was determined. I didn't have the money to run ads or hire influencers, so I relied on organic social media growth and word of mouth. I posted product photos, shared my journey, and interacted with anyone who showed interest. A breakthrough came when I started doing Facebook Live sessions where I talked about skincare, the importance of clean ingredients, and my brand's mission. People loved the transparency, and I started getting more traction. Slowly, the orders started rolling in, and my website traffic began to increase. But I was still working my day job, and every penny I made from sales was reinvested back into the business. There were months when I didn't make a profit, but I kept pushing forward, convinced that if I could just get my products into the hands of more people, things would take off. The turning point came when I finally reached out to a beauty influencer with a decent following who seemed like a good fit for my brand. I sent her a free product in exchange for an honest review, and she loved it. She shared it with her followers, and before I knew it, my website traffic exploded. Sales grew faster than I could handle, and I had to scramble to keep up with the demand. That's when I made my first big hire, a customer service rep who could help with the influx of orders and inquiries. Slowly but surely, the business started to grow, and I was able to quit my job and go full-time with my brand. But the challenges didn't stop there. As the business scaled, so did the complexity. I had to figure out inventory management, shipping logistics, and how to keep up with the ever-growing demand. The biggest challenge, however, was staying true to my brand's mission while managing the rapid growth. By the end of the second year, the brand was doing well. We had a small team, a loyal customer base, and products that people loved. I expanded the line to include a cleanser, a toner, and a serum, all designed with sensitive skin in mind. We kept the focus on high-quality, natural ingredients, and that resonated with our customers. But as we expanded, I realized that I needed to build a stronger brand presence. We started running ads on Instagram and Facebook, partnered with micro-influencers who genuinely loved the products, and focused on building a community around our brand. We also launched a subscription service for customers who wanted regular shipments of their favorite products, which helped with cash flow. Now, 5 years in, we're a multi-million-dollar company. We have a full product line, hundreds of thousands of loyal customers, and a strong presence in the beauty industry. We've been featured in several major publications, and our products are sold in multiple countries. We've built a brand that people trust, and our mission to create simple, effective skincare for sensitive skin has become a core part of who we are. Looking back, I'm amazed at how far we've come. It wasn't easy. There were times when I didn't think we would make it. I had moments of doubt, and there were more challenges than I can count. But I've learned that entrepreneurship isn't about having a flawless plan. It's about being adaptable and willing to learn from your mistakes. If I could give any advice to someone just starting out, it would be this. Don't wait for the perfect moment. Don't wait for the perfect idea. Just start. It's messy, it's hard, but that's where the magic happens. And remember, it's not about how fast you go, but how consistently you keep moving forward. I'm proud of what we've built, but I'm even more excited for the future. This journey has been life-changing, and I'm just getting started. I always thought I was just an ordinary guy trying to make it big. I didn't have some grand vision or an idea that would revolutionize the world. But what I did have was a deep-seated frustration with the daily grind. I worked in a dead-end job, grinding away at a desk job that barely paid the bills, while all around me, people seemed to be getting ahead. They had their businesses, their side hustles, their cars, and their houses. I had nothing but a stack of bills and a boss who treated me like a cog in the machine. It wasn't until I hit rock bottom that I realized it was time to make a change. My story began a few years ago when I found myself at a crossroads. I had just been laid off from my job in a marketing firm. The company was going under, and I was part of the cost-cutting wave that hit the employees. The news hit me hard, but it wasn't the worst thing that had happened to me. What really stung was that I had been there for 5 years, and despite my dedication and hard work, I was still expendable. That's when I began to question everything. How had I gotten to this point in my life? What had I been doing all those years? I had been chasing promotions, trying to climb a corporate ladder that I now realized was never going to lead anywhere substantial. I spent the next few months wallowing in self-pity, but eventually, I pulled myself out of it. I was living on unemployment benefits, but it was clear to me that this situation couldn't last forever. I had to do something. I didn't want to go back to a corporate job where I'd be stuck under someone else's thumb, constantly striving for something that might never happen. The idea of starting my own business had always been a distant dream, something I had toyed with in my head but never had the guts to pursue. But now, with nothing left to lose, I decided to take the plunge. The first thing I did was reflect on what I was good at. I had no expertise in tech or engineering, and I wasn't going to build the next Facebook. But one thing I was good at was problem solving. I had always found ways to make things work more efficiently, and I had a knack for organizing chaos. I decided to start a service-based business, a virtual assistant company. The idea seemed simple enough: offer businesses administrative and organizational support remotely. I figured there had to be a demand for it, especially with the rise of remote work. The next few weeks were spent researching everything I could about virtual assistants, building a website, and marketing my services. I'll admit, I had no idea what I was doing at first. I was spending hours learning how to set up an online presence, figuring out how to find clients, and managing the tiny details that felt overwhelming. There were moments when I almost quit, when the clients weren't coming, when I wasn't sure how to price my services, or when the tech side of things felt like too much to handle. But I kept going. I had to. There was no going back now. My first break came from an unexpected source. I had posted a few ads on local job boards, but nothing substantial had come through. One night, I got a message on LinkedIn from a woman who had seen my profile. She worked for a small e-commerce company and needed help organizing her inbox, managing appointments, and handling customer inquiries. It wasn't glamorous work, but it was a start. I didn't hesitate to take the offer. I was scared to death I wouldn't be able to meet her expectations, but I did my best. I over-delivered on everything, going above and beyond to impress her. Slowly but surely, she became one of my regular clients, and word started to spread. At first, it was just a handful of small clients. I didn't make much money, but I didn't need much either. I was still living modestly, cutting corners where I could. But as time went on, things started to snowball. More clients came through, and I began hiring a few contractors to help with the workload. We expanded the services we offered, including social media management, content writing, and basic graphic design. It wasn't long before we were turning a profit, and that was when I realized that this could be something bigger than I ever imagined. I decided to take a risk and invest some of the profits back into the business. I hired more people, upgraded the tools we used to work more efficiently, and began targeting larger clients. The fear of failure was always lurking in the back of my mind, but I realized that success wasn't about avoiding risk. It was about managing it. We started landing bigger contracts, and the business continued to grow. What started as a one-man operation out of my tiny apartment turned into a small but thriving virtual assistant agency. The first major breakthrough came when I landed a contract with a well-known marketing agency. They had been struggling with administrative work, and I offered them a solution they couldn't refuse. That contract alone almost doubled our revenue, and from there, things started to accelerate. I learned a lot of valuable lessons along the way, especially the importance of building relationships and delivering exceptional service. I also learned that scaling a business wasn't just about getting more clients. It was about building a team that could handle the increased workload without sacrificing quality. There were plenty of challenges along the way, though. The early days were filled with sleepless nights, anxiety, and doubt. I made plenty of mistakes, some of them costly, and there were times when I wasn't sure if I had what it took to succeed. But every setback taught me something. Every failure was a stepping stone, and every win, no matter how small, fueled my motivation to keep going. Today, my business has grown far beyond what I could have imagined. We now have a team of 10 people, and our client base includes some big-name companies. I'm still the same person I was when I started, but I've learned so much along the way. I've learned that success doesn't come overnight, that persistence is key, and that taking risks is an essential part of the journey. But most importantly, I've learned that sometimes it's the lowest points in your life that push you to make the biggest changes. Looking back, I wouldn't trade my corporate job for anything. It taught me the importance of hard work and discipline, but I'm glad I took the leap and built something for myself. The road hasn't been easy, but it's been worth every step. I may not be a millionaire, but I'm doing something I'm passionate about, and that's more than I ever thought I'd have. And if there's one thing I know for sure, it's that the best is yet to come. Thank you for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss new videos. Also, leave a comment. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Your support and engagement mean a lot to me. See you in the next video.